I was a copywriter for other people, for other projects. I think there was a visual side of me that could never really come out fully. People who come from different career backgrounds have a lot to offer and to bring to the table.
Welcome to How Did You Get Into? The podcast where we dive into the stories behind unexpected career paths and the journeys that shape who we are. Each week, I sit down with inspiring people from all kinds of professional backgrounds to ask, how did you get into what you're doing now? And today I'm joined by Katja to talk about how she got into photography as a business in her 30s. She worked in several startups and advertising agency as a project manager and copywriter before she discovered her interest in photography. Since 2019, she has been building up her photography career by taking portraits of various screen actors, musicians, and creatives. Her portrait work has been nominated for several awards like the Portrait Hell Hour Award. Katja is also hosting her own YouTube channel where she talks about the business and money side of photography and helps other artists in the field navigate a complicated and opaque industry. How would you describe what you do to my 6-year-old daughter?
Okay, let me think. Basically, my job is to meet people and then take a picture of them that shows a part of them to the world.
Super nice. I know it's so hard. I mean, I have a hard time when my daughter asks me what I do to put it in words, but I like that you put like the meeting part out there, because I think that's probably also like an element that's super important for you as a photographer.
Yeah, for me, it's important to explain to the people who I'm photographing and who I'm working with that it's a collaborative process. It just doesn't go one way, that you know, I shoot them, I take a picture of them. Of course, that's also what's happening, but actually they have to participate. It doesn't work without the other person who's in front of the camera. And there's trust involved, but there's also always this element of experimentation and trying out stuff, and you're gonna fail. Like, I take maybe 3,000 pictures at a time in a portrait session, and 2,950 will be bad.
Wow, yeah.
So that's kind of part of the process, and accepting, and both sides have to accept that most of it is going to be really bad.
Yeah.
But some of them, maybe 10, and you only need 10 good pictures out of a session usually, are going to be something that, yes, say something about this person or communicate something to the world that we agree we want to communicate.
I wish I could have this attitude in life generally. Let's accept that like 90% of what we put out there is not what we want to put out there, but 10% is. I like this attitude. Was there a moment in your life when like this, where you're now, was or felt impossible?
I think I could never imagine myself doing something artistic or an artistic career, just because from my background and how I was raised, there were basically two options on the table at all times. It's like, get good grades and then get a stable kind of job and career, which for my parents, and that's kind of the typical, I think, first generation immigrant experience as well, is like a doctor or a lawyer. So I think I grew up with this mindset of becoming something really serious, and an artistic career never seemed like something serious or something that I saw represented in my family, how you could become that and how that could be something, a job that sustains you. And so I could never imagine that.
And was this also like the fears that you had at this time when you maybe like daydreamed of being a photographer, like that it's not serious enough, that it's not stable enough?
I think I didn't really think about it because I basically stumbled into becoming a photographer. I started it alongside my other job. I was a copywriter at the time, and photography is just something that I loved and that I started doing more and more. And I felt like I had some kind of talent for it, and the people liked the pictures that I was taking of them. So more and more people started asking me if they could hire me. So I didn't really plan it in that way. It just kind of happened.
So you kind of came to photographer because life made you, or kind of like people asked you, but was there a moment when you said, okay, this is happening, I got to take this serious, I'm a photographer? Like, what was this moment when you consciously said, I'm a photographer?
Well, I think the moment was when I decided to get into photography school. Was a conscious decision that I was very interested in this career path, but I didn't really know at that point if it was going to be something that I could pursue as a career seriously. But I knew I wasn't entirely happy in my previous roles. They weren't really fulfilling me. I love writing, but I was a copywriter for other people, for other projects. And I think there was a visual side of me that could never really come out fully in that, right? Because you're working with text, you're kind of working from inside your own brain all the time, and you're working with the blank page. Whereas in photography, there's this part of capturing the world and going out and meeting people and much more interacting with the world. So that's what I kind of fell in love with. And I think that's what made me decide that actually I want to work more in the visual arts than in what I was doing before in my previous roles.
So was there a moment in your career before that you felt it was like a dead end and you were, I don't know, like almost didn't feel like yourself again in your work?
So I was studying law for 4 years at Oxford University, and that time in my life was actually, I was really down and really depressed. And it took me a while to realize that it was just not, it wasn't for me, and it wasn't the path that was meant for me, and that I should go down. And it was a really hard thing to accept, and I think it took me several years to accept that, even though there was this voice inside of me saying it's not for you, it doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel good. It was really hard to step back from something that is, there's a lot of like privilege and big kind of accolades connected to it. It's really hard to like give that up. Yeah.
Did you have to confront like your parents, because you mentioned like kind of like the expectation of your parents, or was this more like internal expectation that, or like voices of your parents that you had internalized?
Oh yeah, I said I want to drop out, and that they said there's no way.
Wow.
Because it was like 1 year from finishing my degree, and they were like, you will regret it so much in the future, and you will thank us later that you did finish it. And I'm not sure I agree with that right now. But yeah, it was the way it was. I think it has to do with where they come from, and that they wanted that security for me, and they wanted me to have that degree in my hand and that title. And yeah, there was no way around it at that time. It was a very kind of rational, push all emotion aside and just kind of head through the wall, just get through it.
Yeah.
And then you can do something else later. And then it took me a while to figure out what that something else actually is for me. Several years I was like looking and trying different things. And I think I've arrived at that now with photography, hopefully. But yeah, it was definitely a long process.
Nice. Okay. And then while it happened, were there like, I don't know, like blockages or like fears that came up on this path for you?
Yeah, every day. For sure. I'm scared every day on this path, because becoming a creative and becoming an artist is a really scary path, and there are no guarantees, and it is a hard career to make money from, for sure. There's a lot of competition, and you kind of have to be really strategic about it as well. So I'm scared every day that I'm not gonna, produce good enough work, that I'm not gonna get enough clients, and I'm constantly working on this. And I'm definitely not arrived at any sort of outcome.
And do you have like a place inside of yourself, or you still get motivation, like in these moments when it's scary? Like, do you have like a place or a place, I don't know, like a voice in your head that still keeps you going in those moments?
I'm cultivating that voice. I feel like it wasn't there for a really long time, and now it's kind of a small baby right now, and I'm helping it to grow and to become bigger and louder and kind of push out the critical voice that is much stronger inside of me and has been there for years. So it's kind of really trained and in place. But I'm trying to nurture that positive voice and that optimist in myself that kind of keeps me going and taps me on the shoulder and says it's going to be okay.
What is something that helps this voice grow?
So there is a practice that I started last year, and that's to go through every month and write down what has worked out. So focus on the positives. So things that I have achieved, things that worked out, things that went well. Because I think the brain is kind of a problem-solving machine that always focuses in on what's not going right, what's not working, what do I still have to achieve, and always focusing on the bad stuff because we want to problem solve. So integrating a practice where I sit down and I remind myself what has worked out really helped me to kind of see it in a more balanced way.
Yeah, super needed. I can relate. And you do this on a monthly basis, kind of like looking back at the month?
Yeah, I have it as a practice when I feel down, for sure. And I do it at the end of the year, so kind of going through every month. But I also do it just on a basis when I need it and review the past week, the past month, or even the past day and focus in on what are the good parts.
What is something that you do differently than other people in your field?
I guess because I come from very strategic kind of careers and jobs. So I have worked as a copywriter and also in project management, and I have this law background. So I do think about things very strategically and do plan out my career a bit and kind of try to not only work in my business but also on my business, which I feel like is a lot harder for people who just come from a creative and artistic background to kind of see the more business side of things, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's something that I see a lot or have seen a lot working with creatives. So cool that you actually have this. And I mean, there is like this stigma, I guess, especially in Germany when it comes to like Quereinstieg.
Right.
But there's so much insights that you gather, like you did, from doing something entirely different and then taking these insights back to a new field, right?
I feel this a lot in Germany, that people who don't have the specific bachelor or master in a field have a really hard time getting into new careers. And I think it's something that needs to change, actually. And I find it very sad and regrettable that in Germany things are still very kind of stale and not very fluid, because I think that people who come from different backgrounds, different career backgrounds, have a lot to offer and to bring to the table, even not knowing a specific field, but kind of seeing it with fresh eyes for the first time and adding in the expertise that they have from previous things.
I mean, I've experienced that because we did like a shooting together, and I've experienced the strategic side from you, and I've really appreciated it because I feel like the strategic side in a creative profession brings a lot of clarity for clients.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm just wondering, like, what do you feel like could hold other creatives back from like working on the business? Like, is there like any, I don't know, like, fear involved or maybe inner voice that would not allow creatives to work on their business and be strategic and be focused on, money and income?
Well, I think there is a gap in education. I feel it myself that when I'm in photo school, these things are not really taught and talked about as much. And I feel like there is a gap to educate creatives. And that's what I try to do on my YouTube channel, to kind of pass on the knowledge of when you become a photographer, you're actually becoming a business, and you need to think about marketing and you need to think about sales and all of these big, scary things. I think a lot of people are also scared of it and not take themselves maybe seriously enough to allow themselves to work on their business and not just in the business. And also because it's a struggle. Like, a lot of people struggle just to make ends meet and get clients and stuff like that. So they don't even have the time to focus on the bigger picture.
How do you see your field develop in the next years?
Oh my gosh. That's a really good question, and nobody has a crystal ball, obviously, and I don't know, but I do think that AI is going to play a major role, and I already see it, how it's changing things. I don't think that photography will disappear. I think it's here to stay, but maybe it will shift and change with AI coming into the field, and we will all have to adapt and kind of work with these new tools as well. So that's what I'm trying to do, and that's what I also recommend to everybody else in the field, to not be scared of the tools, familiarize yourself, and try out AI, or it's going to take over. And yeah.
I mean, going back to the beginning of our conversation, when you kind of explained to my daughter what you're doing,
Yeah.
I mean, you were putting out this word of like you're meeting people, and I think this is something that AI can never take away, and this is such like a major piece of your work. So yeah, I think like you have like this human piece is in your work, is baked into your work, and so no tool can take this quality of meeting away.
For sure. How would you describe working with me? Like, how was it for you?
I will answer very personally, obviously.
Yeah.
So I, and maybe other people too, I have like sometimes a really hard time to perceive how other people might perceive me.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, there's social media, there's what you put out there about yourself, but I still have such a hard time, like, how do people see me? And I think this is what I've experienced in the shooting with you, that you kind of like went with me together in this kind of like unknown, like blind spot place with me, where I would not like just put like the face that I think how I look like, but I could really go into, I don't know, like feeling like myself while being captured in that. So it didn't feel like, sometimes when you are in a shooting, like it feels like your face is freezing, but it didn't feel this way. It felt like I would be alive in my face.
I'm really happy to hear that, obviously. And for me, that's also what I find interesting, because especially like putting on a smile and your picture perfect face, I do that myself when people photograph me. But I know as a photographer that that's not going to be the image or the picture that lasts over time.
Yeah.
Because you will see the kind of the mask that you are putting on. And I feel it's important to capture that as well, to have it kind of in your repertoire of pictures, because sometimes you need that mask.
Yeah.
But I'm much more interested in seeing all these different kind of sides. And sometimes I get feedback from people who I've photographed. I've never seen myself that way. Mm-hmm. And that could be positive or negative, you know, like sometimes the camera sees something that maybe you're not happy about seeing.
Yeah.
And that you don't like about your face. Actually, usually people don't like many things about their face or their bodies or their hair. And it's very hard for them to look at pictures of themselves. Mm-hmm. And it's the same for me. So it is a challenge to kind of find that thing together. And also the pictures change over time. Like, looking back at pictures, people will feel differently about themselves than in the moment. And there's also not this one way, which I find also very fascinating. Like, there is not one true self that can be captured in an image. Mm-hmm. There's always going to be 1,000 facets of yourself, and it's ever changing. And you're never going to look like you are perceived in real life as a person who's moving, who has an expression with your voice and gives out like an energy. It's impossible to capture that in a still image.
Yeah, it sounds like almost like there's a, I don't know, like almost like a mysticism as part of your work. I don't know if you would see it that way. Like if you have like almost like this hidden thread, like you are very much also like on the business, realistic, strategic. Yeah. But now it sounds like there's also like this more hidden or almost like mysterious part of your work.
Yeah, maybe. I think it also has to do with my fight against my inner perfectionist and the perfectionist of the people who I meet. Mm-hmm. Like, because that's like the worst situation, right? So it's my inner perfectionist trying to get the best picture, and it's their inner perfectionist trying to show their best features and side. And in that way, you can never achieve anything basically together. But if you kind of let go and you allow the process of as I mentioned, like failing and accepting that the result is not going to be you. The result is going to be one little glimpse of you and part of a process. It makes you relax into the process, have fun, which is really important, I think, with taking pictures. Like, we're not doing heart surgery here. Like, we're having some fun as well, and makes the process like pleasurable actually for both sides. And hopefully, having fun in the process makes you also like the result much more in the end.
Yeah, I mean, I can testify for that. That was my experience. Thanks so much for being our first guest on How Did You Get Into? Yeah, this was super, super nice to talk with you as a first guest.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's it for today's episode of How Did You Get Into? If you're also thinking about changing your career or starting a business, we at Fired Up would love to support you with free coaching. Just book an intro call to learn more. Hearing stories like the one we heard today is exactly why we do what we do. Change is always an opportunity. If you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to subscribe for more inspiring stories every week. And if there's someone you would love to hear from or a career you're curious about, drop us a message. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for tuning in and see you next time.